Welcome back. It's still Newsweek, where we discuss the biggest stories that made the headlines in the week. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission yesterday conducted a supplementary election for 2 governorship seats and 93 legislative seats across 24 states of the Federation. A total of 2,660 polling units across 185 local governments are affected. Supplementary governorship elections were held in Kebbi and Adamawa states, where they were earlier declared inconclusive. In Adamawa, the elections held in a total of 69 polling units and 142 polling units in Kebbi state, with 36,935 and 94,209 eligible voters respectively participating. For the State House of Assembly positions, elections will be held for 57 constituencies in 17 states. The senatorial elections will also be held in the northwestern states of Sokoto, Kebbi, and Zamfara. Meanwhile, supplementary elections for the House of Representatives was held for 31 constituencies in 15 states. Still with me to discuss this is Babatudo Gondiro, a policy analyst who is in the studio with me. And I have Ayodele Odio, a political analyst, joining me via Zoom. Good evening, Mr. Ayodele.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
All right, let me have your take. What do you make of the supplementary elections held in states where they took place?
I mean, the biggest story today is coming out of Adamawa State, where supplementary elections, not necessarily supplementary elections, but elections that were cancelled and postponed in certain polling units and some local government in Adamawa State was held today. And a winner was purportedly announced hours before the INEC head office in Abuja overrode that fraudulent announcement. And I would argue that that's the biggest story coming from the supplementary elections today, because what we saw was not just, pockets of irregularities, across certain polling units where these elections held. What we saw was a total shamble of somebody who was not authorized to announce an election, who took upon that role in such a brazen manner to do such, without announcing the results that were scored, the number of votes that were tallied, and had the temerity to announce, the winner of that election in contravention, of the Electoral Act and in contravention of INEC's own rules and internal procedures. And it was shocking. It was shocking to behold for many Nigerians to see that unfold. And, we're quite a bit relieved that INEC has put out a statement condemning what had happened and declaring that announcement, null and void. We have also seen civil society organizations like IAGA, also condemn that fraudulent process, and has called on the appropriate authorities to take decisive action, against, what had happened in Adamawa State today. And I hope that sanity prevails. Because we're talking about the integrity of our electoral process, and we're talking about the confidence of Nigerians in the electoral umpire, which is INEC. And if such instances are allowed to slide, what you would see over time is that Nigerians will continue to lose confidence in the electoral process, and we'll see more and more low voter turnout in subsequent elections, which doesn't speak well of our electoral process and the entire confidence in the system. So for me, that's the biggest story coming out today. And I think that Nigerians across board should condemn what had happened in Adamawa State and put pressure on INEC to do the right thing, to restore confidence in that institution and not allow that brazen and flagrant disregard for due process to stand.
All right, Ayodele, let's talk about the power of incumbency. Do you think it's business as usual?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by business as usual, because first of all, there are nuances to this conversation. The reality is that Beavers has proven a game changer to a very large extent, because what the Beavers has done is that it's made it very impossible for people to inflate numbers, of accredited voters that usually sway elections in time past in our country, where people can just call friends and neighbors, children underaged or whatsoever, to just thumbprint on ballot papers and boycott the accreditation process. That can no longer happen in our system. And that, for me, is a huge step forward. To that extent, you've seen governors in certain states, and I think about governors who are top of the head, who have failed in their elections to go to the Senate. Even as sitting governors, they lost their elections because of the credibility of the accreditation process, where it becomes very impossible to simply inflate numbers in the way and manner that it was done in the past. I think that where the albatross now is in the logistics of INEC, in the way that it manages election day operations, in its inability to deal with violence on election day. And I think most profoundly is the fact that I think I've come to realize, that INEC seems to take the position of, it's our job to announce a result after votes have been counted and parties can go and settle their issues in court. And that, for me, brings a serious question, a credibility question to our process. Because I think that is what was tried to be exploited in Adamawa today. INEC seems to just want to announce results. Parties can go and contest it, whether they like it or not, in court. I think that the onus should be on INEC to at least do all it can within its powers, and it has very broad and sweeping powers under the Electoral Act, to ensure that there is some sort of credibility and sanity to the process, such that when it announces results, it will be very, very difficult to fault the process. And even when they are aggrieved parties and they decide to approach the court for resolution, the matters will be would have such clarity, that it wouldn't impinge on the integrity of the institution. So for me, these are the issues, that I see, and I do not think that the power of incumbency has really played any significant role in the elections. And I know that you're talking about the incumbent president, for instance. The reality is that he hasn't meddled in the process. He hasn't brought federal might to any of the elections across the state. He's allowed the process to unfold, and he's allowed the level playing field. I think the problem, of course, like I said, is in the institution's preparation in terms of the efficiency of the process, and the fact that they are setting back in the institution that seem to want to also sabotage gains that are being made by the commission. And again, if you also and there's another big story from the Premium Times today that was published today, a huge story that published the real results from the Rivers State election, that claims quite confidently that the person who won the elections, or the presidential elections in Rivers State, did not correspond to what was collated on the IREV. So these are the issues that we have to contend with. Yeah. And these are the issues that have nothing to do with the power of incumbency, but largely by the rank and file of people in INEC who seem to drop the ball, at very important instances.
All right, Ayodele, let me come to you, Babatunde. A whole lot have happened looking at Adamawa State, and nobody saw that coming. But why INEC is left to get all of that sorted out? Do you think INEC in any way improved in the supplementary election?
To be very honest with you, I did not see any improvement. And a lot of us were actually looking forward towards the supplementary elections that, okay, fine, that is going to be an opportunity for INEC to correct some anomalies that has probably happened in the past, and they will be able to fix it. So for us, having a supplementary election, which is not a general election, is something that we still find very, very funny and awry, that even at this constituencies that just, talking about just the micro of the entire political, ecosystem, and INEC has found one thing. It tells us that there's a lot of things to actually be done in INEC in terms of an overhauling, restructuring of the INEC as an organization. Because whether we like it or not, the processes are not what we actually expect from INEC. It's quite unfortunate that you have a scenario, like Ayodele said, that an election was announced and the rec was summoned. All this kind of drama and all is not too good for our democracy and the kind of image we want to portray as a democratic nation.